Okay, I did say that I would get this up by Saturday. It is Monday. I'm sorry. There are way too many permutations and variations, and I severely underestimated the Earth line and how much you actually have to understand and know in this line, and the amount of prep work I had to do to get this video out was nothing to snooze at. So I apologize for being a little late on this one. There's probably going to be a lot of lines in here that seems like old news to you. If that's the case, I highly encourage you to skip around the video to go around and see if there's a line or emblem that you particularly enjoy, and maybe there's something in there that I might have noticed or have said that is not something that you might have considered. Obviously, there's a bunch of YouTubers, a bunch of people who have already covered the Earth line pretty in depth, so there isn't too many niche variations in here, at least not that I am aware of. But I did try to do my best to try to find, you know, tidbits of new information for people who may not be super up to date with everything that's going on within this particular playstyle. So we're just gonna get on with the video. And listen, hey, real quick, I know somebody mentioned that like I ramble way too much, but they like the content. Listen, man, I just ramble. That's just who I am. I try not to. I try to be as concise as I can be, but my mind is always going on like 1,000 miles per hour. So you should edit it and post. I'm lazy. I'm sorry. This is the quality that you get. Maybe in the future, if I had like an infinite time, I would edit these down, but it takes forever. So quite honestly, like it's not really worth the time for me to like be able to invest it to, you know, cut it down so it's perfectly concise. It would just take too much time. So I apologize. It's a one-man show. I do the best that I can, but moving on. Again, if you're that guy, I'm sorry, bro. I try. Anyways, moving on. So first one, bruiser emblem. So bruiser emblem. Easily S tier emblem, one of the best ones. It's so flexible, and the reason why a lot of pro players really enjoy the bruiser emblem is because bruisers, there's two main lines that you can play this, and both of them are very strong. One's actually slightly better than the other in my opinion, but nonetheless, let's quickly go over it. So first main line, Cho'Gath 3. The main line for Cho'Gath 3 is very simple. You just roll on 3-1 at level 4, trying to hit all the 3 stars you're looking for, right? The Cho'Gath 3, the Cassiopeia 3. If you severely miss, you're gonna try again at 3-5 and just stop rolling at 32, right? But if you're 2 off, 1 off, you can probably just dig deeper, just try to hit everything that you need. But nonetheless, Cassiopeia 3, Cho'Gath 3. Everyone's very aware of this during the Cho'Gath meta, but this line is higher cap, but I would argue is less reliable. And the reason is because unless there's a bunch of 1-cost rerollers in your lobby, the current meta doesn't really favor 1-cost reroll anymore. So we're seeing a lot less 1-cost rerolls taken out of the pool, thus making it much harder to hit. If you've been playing 1-cost rerolls recently, and maybe you played in a lobby where nobody else was playing 1-cost reroll, it can feel really bad trying to hit your units. You can hit pretty late because nobody's helping you, right? And that can be just a detriment when playing this variation. So a second line or a second main line has sort of evolved where you just play vertical standard bruisers. And you might look at this and you might be like, it doesn't seem like that strong because, you know, you don't have the Cho'Gath 3 or the Renekton 3, but quite honestly, it's totally fine. And bruisers, 6 bruisers in particular, there's just so many stats pumped into this vertical trait that your opponent has a really difficult time breaking through. Right? It's just too many stats, and that's why this composition is so good. And on top of that, a lot of pro players love this line because of how flexible it is. You can play Nila in the backline carry, that is the main line, but you can play some niche variations like Azir as well, or even Mordekaiser as your backline damage, depending on your position, depending on the items that you are dropped. Again, we are playing Earth, we're not playing TF anymore, so we are getting items, like, we have to play around our items, basically is what I'm trying to say. But I will mention this though. Mordekaiser, I do have him here as the bruiser crest holder, but obviously he is not the max cap. The max cap, and by the way, this is why you should really try to keep your Renektons if you can, because the max cap is actually K'Sante and playing around a bruiser emblem with K'Sante. K'Sante with the bruiser emblem, especially at 2 stars, is like in this unkillable, like immovable object who just like shoves shit off the board, and your opponent is there like just mentally damaged. Like this unit is not okay with the bruiser emblem. Easily the best bruiser emblem crest holder in the entire game, but until then you're gonna need an item holder. I like Mordekaiser, especially with GA, because you know you want the bows on your Nila, you're not getting any bows on this Mordekaiser, so something like a Mordekaiser with the bruiser emblem instead, with 2-starred and like stuff like, you don't even really need, to be honest, that much attack speed in my opinion. I think because you have bruiser, he has so much HP, he's gonna generate the mana anyways, and then with GA it just ensures his survivability. Just get anything onto him. Hodge, JG, I personally like Hodge a lot, but I think JG is fine. I think Nashor's is great if you can find another bow to throw onto him, but nonetheless, very fantastic line. This is one of the S tier boards in the current meta. Next, moving on, demacia emblem. So Demacia Emblem, also S tier as fuck. You can hear a lot of pro players say if you don't hit Demacia, it's a 2-1 FF. That's not entirely true, but it just feels like Demacia is just such a strong emblem that a lot of players are like, dude, like this shit's like broken as fuck. Obviously, I do have Quinn here, 3-star. This is not the main line to play. Funny enough, the main line is actually 2-star Quinn, and you just tempo with 2-star Quinn because a lot of the 2-star 3 costs right now are very, very meta. We're seeing a lot of vanq, a lot of Quinn, a lot of even like Jace. That's a lie. It's really just Quinn and vanq. Those are the 2 main 3 costs right now. But also, sorry, Carrick as well. But nonetheless, 2-star Quinn is very, very strong, helps you tempo through the mid game, and gets you to level 7, level 8 very, very comfortably. And then depending on your spot, depending on how many Quinns you got at level 7, how many you've natural throughout the course of the game, you can maybe go for Quinn 3, reroll at 7, or just push 8 and get into 4 Slayer, and you're chilling with a 7 Demacia 4 Slayer board. Very strong board, allows you to easily top 4 most lobbies. Demacia emblem holder is almost always going to be a Mordekaiser. I did look into like the other like Demacia emblem holders you could probably play around. I couldn't really find any that really made sense. You could theoretically do like Rek'Sai 3 with like Demacia emblem. I don't really know how strong this is. Also, you're playing for like a lot of money here. So I like you would drop like the Mordekaiser probably, or maybe drop like if you I don't really know. It'd probably drop Mordekaiser, but I don't really know how reliable that line is. But it's definitely like an option that you can play as well. But there wasn't anything that I was looking through. I didn't look too deeply into it, and I'm not the best at Earth. But across everything else, Mordekaiser really seems to be like the only Demacia emblem holder. Nila's radiant item is Titans, which is just not very good. You actually need the RFC on Nila no matter what. And if you've played Nila before, you understand that unless she's got 2 RFCs going on her, feels really bad. You can maybe make an argument that like in Hearth Home specifically, the realm that gives you a radiant item, you could actually play Demacia Nila. The idea being is that if you Demacia crest the Nila inside a Hearth Home, she ends up getting a radiant Titans along with the RFC that you can turn radiant, and then this is basically the same as having 2 RFCs, and suddenly this can do a lot of damage. This is a very, very niche case scenario though, and I don't really think it's a main line. But if you happen to be in Hearthstone specifically and you have Demacia Crest at 2-1, this is definitely something that you can consider. Just be careful though, Nila is a very, very, very highly contested unit in the current meta. But if you natural it, then sure, try to play around this line. But usually you do try to cap out with 2 Demacia emblems if you can, and you try to play around 9 Demacia, which I don't actually have listed somewhere. I do apologize. It was supposed to be this board, but it's just not there. But you get the idea. You just hold a Poppy throughout the entirety of the game. You find another Demacia emblem. It's pretty straightforward. It doesn't matter who it is. It's probably like, it really does not matter who you play. We'll just throw in Heimerdinger for fun. Fuck it. But Heimerdinger, and you just get a second Demacia emblem. Boom. And 9 Demacia. If you can get the 9 Demacia relatively safely, it's just a win out. This is easily the strongest 9 chase trait, I think, out of all of them at the moment. 9 Noxus is sort of the only one that's sort of maybe better than 9 Demacia. I'm not really entirely sure, but I think the unit quality in Noxus is slightly higher, so maybe that is what sort of sets it off balance, but I'm not really sure. They both use Mordekaiser at the end of the day, so I don't know, man. But they're both insanely strong. 9 Demacia, if you can find that angle, definitely shoot for it. It's easily the strongest vertical in the game. Now, there is a second line for Demacia I will mention real quick, which is Kale Reroll. This is less popular in North America for sure. I think the main reason is because, again, 1-cost rerolls aren't really in the meta. Unless there's a Cho'Gath player in your lobby, you probably wouldn't run this version. Or maybe you natural like 6 Kales, and maybe you do play this line. But the idea is that there's also this Kale version where you play for Kale 3, and you can roll for Poppy 3, but also I would actually hold Alawi's as well. The reason is because Alawi's radiant item is actually Radiant Chalice. It's called Jacksho the Protean, or Protean, or whatever it's called. But I think a lot of people kind of sleep on this radiant item. I actually think it's really, really strong. One of the main reasons is not only because of the just pure stats, but also because of the way that Alawi works and the way that the mana regen works. So whenever you get hit by an attack, you gain 1 mana, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it adds up pretty quickly with Alawi, especially because the idea is that she just kind of like, you can even use gargoyles instead of warmogs here, but I have warmogs, it's whatever. But the idea is that once she casts, she's basically like unkillable, which is kind of insane. And then because of the way that Jacksho works, she's able to regain her mana pretty fucking fast. And then by doing so, she's able to just cast again and again and again and again. And it's like this unkillable frontline. I think a lot of people sleep on Alawi 3, especially when itemized, but I think she's actually an incredibly strong slept on Bastion unit. So if you end up playing this Kale version, I highly do recommend going for the Alawi 3. And this Poppy 3, it's in here, but Poppy 2, Poppy 3, no diff. Not gonna lie, this unit is really fake. But nonetheless, I think Alawi 3 with the Radiant item especially, super strong frontline. It's basically like uncrackable in my opinion. And then you just play some demacia, very standard, and you just tempo with it, try to play into 9 if you get the opportunity. Again, very strong line, easily one of the strongest in the entire game. If you get the demacia crest 2-1, just make sure, please, by the way, if you're playing Earth, please for the love of God, scout. For the love of God, scout. I played one game where 4 people went gunners, myself included, but 4 people took a gunner crest. Not a good time. Nobody scouted, myself included. I will never relive that mistake again. Please scout before you pick up your emblems, or you will have a very bad time, trust me. Anyways, moving on. Freljord emblem. Now Freljord emblem only has one main line, that is the Nila variation. This is pretty obvious. You might recognize this board if you watched the TF video. This is just the Nila composition. You just smack a Freljord emblem onto whoever here. Does not really matter. You just boom. I like Misfortune because you eventually drop this for GP and you can just move the Freljord emblem to whatever shitter you want. Does not really matter, but nonetheless, very strong. If you get the Freljord emblem, it's actually really strong. You get to just hard force Nila here. That should not be against you, by the way. That should be an RFC, but really strong line. You just basically hard force Nila and just that's just the game. There's no other real mainline with Freljord. I tried looking into other variations, but this is the only one I could really find. There is the 4 Vanquisher version as well. It's just so much weaker though, so I didn't really want to include it. But I guess for the sake of the video, I guess we could go over it real quick. The 4 Vanquisher, if you just don't know, this was meta a little while ago, back when what's your name, Zaya was a bit more meta. But the idea is that you just play around I believe it's 3 Ionia with 4 Vanquishers. Again, it's not nearly as meta as it used to be, but it's still a very strong version that you can go for. You can still play with the 3 Freljord as well, but like, would I rather play this versus like the other version? No, I would not. But still, if your items are leaning really poorly for Nila, like let's say you got like 0 bows, like then yeah, play this line. This is your best option. I wouldn't say it's like a B tier board by any means, but like, is it as competitive versus other lines in the current meta? No, it's not. So play this line if you have to, if your hand is forced, but again, try to lead the Nila one as much as you can with Nila Freljord, with the Scion and the Bilge one. That is so much more reliable than this board. But still, very possible to play this line. Do not sleep on it. Next, Gunner Crest. Now, Gunner Crest is kind of interesting. It has a weird history in Set 9 where a lot of people, when they think of the Gunner Crest, they think of 6 Gunner, right? It's sort of the big thing that people think about. But when you think about Gunners, you also think about Piltover. So a lot of people, when they get a Gunner Crest, they sort of auto default to Piltover and playing around Piltover no matter what. But with the current patch and the way that Piltover is, I don't think it's like something that you can just pivot into for fun. It's like, because the thing is that Jace 3 right now, it's a strong unit, but to get to Jace 3 means I have to itemize the Jace 2 and then stabilize with the Jace 2 for a really long time. It's not very reliable. So Gunner Crest, I would actually argue playing around Rogues is your better option, and playing around 4 Rogue with 6 Gunner is going to be just the go-to default if you can whenever you're given this line. Obviously, you are sort of playing around a 1 cost here because you are playing around the Graves 3 ideally, but the idea is that once you get up to 6 Gunner, this thing is basically unkillable. All you do is just BT and just like whatever damage items you want. It does not really matter. Just stray away from Titans though if you can. I don't think Titans is very good, but things like BT, things like Night Harvester, right? Items that really amplify the damage out of Graves here, it's going to be really nice here. And like third item can be literally whatever. I think Starax is Biss, right? But literally whatever, it does not matter. He will go infinite because Gunner gives him so much AD. So you just keep going vertically up the tree. Here you can also see Jinx 3 is also hidden here as well. Not as necessary, but still a very viable carry as well. You actually don't even have to Gunner the Kiana. There's nobody better to Gunner. That's the only reason why it's on her. But like 3-starring Kiana is super fake news. You don't actually have to do it. You can just stick with the 2, just push 7, and then just keep teching onto units, or maybe even try to push a fast 8 and then start rolling there. I mean, you'd have to be high rolling pretty hard to do something like that, but that's still also an option as well. Take it with a grain of salt. Maybe on level 7 you're not playing 6, you're playing 4 Gunners instead, and then you're playing like Ixtal, or maybe, yeah, it's probably just Ixtal because you're not getting a GP on 7. Who the fuck's getting GP on 7, you know? Maybe play around the Ixtal, whoever. Maybe if it's electric, you can play Jinx in the backline here, and she can utilize the electric hex, which is really, really nice. But you can also get stuff like ice for Graves. You can get stuff like stone for Graves. Stuff like wood is really, really nice as well. But nonetheless, it's very much rogue, but you just play gunners. Now, obviously, we do have to mention, though, that nonetheless, Piltover is still a viable out here. You do want to play around Aphelios instead of Jace, though. I think 9 times out of 10, it's Aphelios over Jace, unless you're high rolling a lot of the Jaces. Aphelios is just way more consistent. It's just way more consistent. It's a lower cap than Jace 3, but you're way more likely to top 4 with Aphelios 2 than you are with the Jace 3, because to get to Jace 3, you lose so much HP trying to get there. It takes forever. Obviously, if you have a bunch of items getting dropped for you, then you can also itemize the Jace as well. And then I mean, from that spot, though, it's just a win now, right? You just itemize him with whatever. It's usually GS, Runean's Guardbreaker, but there's a bunch of different things you can go. For the love of God, though, please stop building Deathblade on Jace on Aphelios. I cannot believe people still build Deathblade on Aphelios. And the reason why is because back in set 9, you built Deathblade on Aphelios because he lacked AD. Because he used to be a Deadeye. He wasn't a gunner, he was a Deadeye. And Deadeyes, they would just shoot the backline target, right? But without AD, they wouldn't actually kill anything. So people got into the habit of building Deathblade on Aphelios. But nowadays, because he's a gunner and he gets so much AD out of the gunner trait, Deathblade is very redundant. It is super redundant. So it's things like IE, things like GS, things like Ginsu, like things that help amplify the AD that he's already being given through the trait are way better on Aphelios than something like Deathblade. So I would not, please stop building Deathblade on gunners. It's just not very, very good. I will say, though, this is one of the nicher lines in the gunner line with the gunner crest. I don't know how I feel about it. I think there is a lot of potential for gunner Ashe to be good, but I think your spot needs to be super, super good for it. Like, super good for it. I only got to try to play this line once because I was heavily contested for gunners. Actually, funny enough, it was in the 4 gunner lobby that I was talking about earlier. But unfortunately enough, I actually didn't get to the point where I was able to hit Ashe 3 or set 3. I actually died with Ashe 2 set 2. But I actually think this line is fine if you manage to hit the conditions, which is you have to hit the Ashe 3 set 3 as your main tanks, and then you push level trying to get into the 4 Juggernaut, 4 Vanquisher line. Is this any good? I don't know. I think it has potential, but I don't know how it fares compared to a lot of other meta boards. I don't know how well Ashe 3 does, especially with Gunner, into like stuff like Bruisers and how it fares into those kind of matchups. But I think it's fine. The idea is pretty simple. The idea is that with Vanquisher, you get a lot of innate crit, and then you get a lot of AD from Gunners, right? And so the idea is that you sort of put these traits together, and then you're able to play around Ashe, who basically utilizes the best of both worlds and then tries to clear the board. Again, I don't know how good this line is. There are so little stats on this. There's only 2 games in Diamond Plus ever, but it averages a 1.5. So take it as you will. I mean, that's a sample size of 2. Like, maybe they both like high rolled out of their minds, and that's understandable. But I do think this line has potential. Maybe it's not good this patch, but maybe the next patch is good. I actually haven't looked at the rundown yet, but just keep an open mind, you know, experiment, you know, you play around with things. I think Gunner Ashe, again, I have hope. I have hope that this line could maybe be good, but I mean, I'm looking at this board, it looks like trash. But I mean, you know, maybe there's a world. But anyways, moving on. Slayer Crest. Now, Slayer Crest used to be like the S tier of crests, and the reason why was because of Fiora. Fiora was like easily the best Slayer Crest holder. It wasn't even close. You just radiant item her and get a BT. All you need is a BT. You need 1 sword, 1 cloak, and boom, you have Fiora Abyss. So this used to be the main line for 6 Slayers, and this was like everyone's like favorite line because this Fiora would go infinite, nothing could kill it. But ever since the rework, nowadays it's really hard to find a decent 3rd Slayer item holder, or Slayer Crest holder rather, right? And you know, nowadays people instead play around for Quinn 3 instead, and then they just use Fiora as like this trait bot. But quite honestly, I don't even know if I would even itemize like BT Titans on her anymore. I would actually just start throwing things on the Aatrox once you find it. I think this Fiora unit is quite honestly super dead. It's just not, she's just not the unit that she used to be. She's not as impressive as she used to be. And ever since her rework, it's really hard to find success with a Fiora on your board. I think nowadays, instead of going for Fiora, you could even put the Slayer Crest onto something like J4 just for the trait bot. But you could also do maybe Slayer Neela. Now, I think this line is more reliable than trying to like win out with like Quinn 3, and you don't have to play a dead Furor on your board anymore, so you're not really rolling for like these weird like really high roll niche conditions, right? Like Quinn 3 is very hard to hit. I think Neela is sort of this like best of both worlds, where it's not too difficult to hit, but she still makes a lot of value out of Slayer Crest. The idea being is that you can think of this as like a BT but better, and that's kind of what Neela is in this sort of situation here. As you can tell though, obviously every single bow would end up going on her, and then Mordekaiser ends up getting stuff like GA, Hodge, again like we talked about this earlier. Again, Mordekaiser very good GA holder, but he won't get a lot of bows if you're playing this line, or playing this variation rather, so it's a little difficult to make sure you hit good items on Mordekaiser as well here. Again, I would say this line is more reliable, but it's a top 4. It definitely top 4s, but like it's gonna be hard to hit because Mordekaiser is very contested, Neela's very contested. I don't think that this is a reliable line, and if you're given other options throughout your emblem choices, Slayer, you should try to stray away from it if you can, because the conditions are pretty difficult to hit. We are playing around Mordekaiser 2, Sejuani 2, Neela 2, so take that as you will. Moving on, Void. Void really only has one really good line, and that is the re-rolled Void line. Excuse me, those are the hash browns for this morning. The re-roll Void line with 6 Void and Shelly Rift Herald. Now this line really likes Void Emblem, and the reason why is because with Void Emblem you basically get to roll on 6 odds instead of 7 odds. And why do we like rolling on 6 odds? Well, it's because we can still find a decent amount of 1 cost, maybe 3-star the Cho'Gath, maybe 3-star the Malzahar, but also find the Caster 3 very easily, Talia 3 very easily, but also look for Vel'Koz and Rek'Sai as well, because the odds for 3 costs at level 6 are not that much lower than level 7. It's 30% versus 35%. It's not that different. I will say though that if you are playing this line, the more Void Emblems the better. The idea is that if you just get more and more Void Emblems, you just get to keep teching onto more multicasters, and your spot is just so good. You just play something like Sona, and then again you just Void Emblem her. Very, very simple. You just keep teching onto the multicasters as you level up and progress, and the game gets easier. You can actually drop one of them, like let's say you never found Malzahar 3 because that shit's fake news. That's fine, and the level 7 suddenly you're just playing 4 multicasters, right, with 6 Void, and you are chilling. Now some people will argue that Baron is better than Shelly. I would argue that that is very fake news. I think Shelly in this variation of Void is better than Baron, and the reasoning why is purely because I don't think this Baron unit is very good. I think the CC that Shelly provides is good enough, and I think the damage that she provides is very comparable with Baron, because as you 3-star all of your Void units and you get so much stats pumped into Shelly, she is a force to be reckoned with. That is insane how strong Shelly can be, especially when you send her like this onto the opponent's board. They all clump around her, and then she does massive AoE damage, arguably even more than Baron. From my experience, I don't think Baron has ever done better than Shelly, ever. I generally think almost all the time it's 6 Void every single time, and you play it on the multicaster line. Now, obviously, this means that maybe they should buff Baron, or maybe they should nerf Shelly a bit. I don't really know what's going to happen, but nonetheless, that's something for the dev team to decide, not me. I will say this though real quick about this line. I don't think it's very reliable. Obviously, we are playing multicaster. When we are playing multicasters, we are heavily contested for multicasters, and your win condition for this composition is trying to hit stuff like Vel'Koz 3, trying to hit stuff like Rek'Sai 3, right? And Rek'Sai 3 is very doable, right? But Rek'Sai 3 alone is not enough to win out lobbies. You need Vel'Koz 3 to win out with this board, or some insane spot like Endless Hordes, where you just have to keep throwing on Void units onto your board, and then you basically clusterfuck the shit out of your board with a bunch of Void units, and all those Void units, their star levels add into Shelly. Duplicates count. So for example, like let's say you're not close to the Kassadin 3 yet, right? But you hit Endless Hordes, you're Kassadin 2, then just keep playing Kassadin. You can just play something like this. Maybe you're not at the, like you do this, and like this. That's fine. And actually, all of this will help buff Shelly. And I have a clip somewhere. I'll probably play it on screen. But like when you hit this combination, it's like a top 2. It's basically a first, to be honest, but it's like a guaranteed top 2. You have too many stats on your board, your opponent can literally do nothing about it, and Shelly gets like 500, 600 AP, some like absurd stat. So again, this combination of augments is insane, but again, it all can only be enabled if you do have that Void Emblem. And again, I would not really play this line unless you were in a very good position to play in it. Maybe not that many multicaster players, or maybe your HP preservation is too high, stuff like that. But Very solid line, very something to consider if you get that void emblem. Just make sure you scout very heavily because multicasters will be the death of you. Moving on here, zaun emblem. Now, I don't recommend zaun emblem unless you are in Placidium Library. That is the only realm I would ever be okay taking this emblem. The reason being is because zaun, 6 zaun is good, but you have to get there. And the problem is the getting to 6 zaun is very difficult because the only way to get zaun emblems is through traits and through realms. Like, there's nothing else that gives you the zaun emblem because it's elusive. So trying to hit that 6 zaun is like a pipe dream. And if you're only stuck with 4 zaun, it's kind of a GG. Like, 4 zaun is very not competitive in the current meta right now. And actually, real quick, if you look into the stats here, we'll just keep it a diamond plus. But if we look at 4 zaun, look at that, 4.49, 50.7 percentile 4 rate is just not that great. And actually, as you go higher and higher, surprisingly enough, actually, the average is going up a little bit, which is actually very surprising. So maybe there is some merit with Jinx reroll. But I don't, in general, I really would not play this line. I think it's really difficult because, like, Jinx 3 sure is a 3.79, but Jinx 2 is a 5.08. So if you missed, you're dead. So very gambly line, not my favorite, but 6 zaun is definitely the way to go. If you play 6 zaun, just like with the Gunner Crest, you would probably preferably play Rogue. Now, this board looks very lit and very difficult to hit, I understand. But again, Placidium Library, it can definitely happen, and funny enough, this actually happened during the DSG trials, whereas we can see here, this is Brosif, who is playing in the trials, and again, if you don't know what the trials are, it was basically a lot of really high elo players competing for a spot on the DSG pro team for Vegas, right? And we can see Brosif Milk, a lot of really strong players, Wajan, D-Pay, Clear, Boston Skills, a lot of really strong names in here. And, you know, Brosif was able to hit all of the conditions to make this composition work here. And crazy enough, he was able to make the board completely work out because he had doubles on him because he's in Placidium, and also he just found a Slayer Crest eventually, which is kind of nice for the Kiana, not very necessary. But he was able to just completely win out the lobby with a 6 zaun 4 Rogue board, which is just absolutely disgusting. Like, this spot, like, to get to this point is absolutely insane. And even then, even though he got to this spot, it was hella close. The fight was hella close. So, like, would I recommend this line? I mean, if you're trying to cook, yeah, go for it. But, like, is it like an incredibly reliable line? No, it's very difficult. And again, unless Placidium Library, would not recommend. But something to consider. Anyways, moving on. 6 Ionia. Ionia slash Vanquisher Crest have definitely fallen out of the meta. I think Ashe 3 is really the only good version of Ionia Crest holders at the moment. Especially if because 2-cost rerolls is very contested right now because of Galio getting contested out of the pool. So you're basically guaranteed like 1 less unit out of the pool, kind of. Especially because Talia TF are also going to be a lot taken out of the pool. A lot of 2-costs are very strong in the current meta. Ashe for the Nilas. So trying to hit the Ashe. Well, I guess Ashe is slightly contested because of the Nilas, right? So maybe it's a little hard. But Ashe 3 is definitely the best Ionia Crest holder. You could also just tempo into Ionia Nila, but I think a lot of people sort of realize that this is also very difficult to hit because Nila is so contested in the current meta. So, I mean, I don't think I would recommend Ionia Crest too often unless you have nothing better. Or maybe there's just a bunch of 2-cost rerollers. Maybe there's a Jinx reroller in your lobby for whatever reason. Or maybe a Casting Hero Augment reroller, right? In those situations, sure. Good enough. But would I recommend the line? No, I wouldn't. But still, nonetheless, GS Deathblade Ashe is probably your BIS. But she can use a lot of things. GS Last Whisper is really nice on her as well. You have a bunch of different itemization opportunities here. It's just a very good time. I will say this though, Vanquisher Crest, we did cover this very briefly or not briefly, we actually went pretty in depth in the last video, so I won't go too in depth with this. But Vanquisher Crest, if you've managed to find the boss on 3-2 after fighting the Vanquisher Crest, this is kind of an auto GG. Sorry, this should not be JG, this should be Night Harvester. But nonetheless, it's still a very strong board to be playing around. Definitely something that you can consider. Sorry, my alarm is going off. It's my alarm to tell me that I'm supposed to be streaming right now. But I want to get the video out. So, like, I have to get the video out. I promised it like 2 days ago. I'm late. Anyways, Vanquisher Crest, really great. The set, very good stuff. If you don't manage to find the sets or you're heavily contested for a set for whatever reason, maybe someone's playing Ionia Ashe, you can actually just tempo with a tank set instead, and then you can play around Ionia Ari, or Vanquisher Ari rather. Really strong Vanquisher Crest holder. Again, this basically acts as a JG, so it's very strong, and you can just cap out with Ari instead. Super good stuff. Next, Shurima. Now, Shurima emblem, again, S tier emblem. I would argue Shurima, Demacia, and Bruiser, very S tier. It's like not even close compared to the other ones. Absolutely insane emblem. The reasoning is because 6 shurima is very strong currently. Verticals are super strong, and if you can cap out with 9 shurima, like sort of similar to like 9 demacia, really strong if you manage to find that second emblem. Again, one of the best 9 verticals. I don't know if it's as strong as 9 demacia, but it's up there. It's very up there. I will say though, there is a second variation of this line. Obviously, this is just vertical shurima. You just play 6 shurima, and then if you find the emblem, great, go 9. It's very straightforward. But also itemizes here. GS, Nashor's, Shiv. Good. I'm sure we all know that by now. Set's almost over. But there is a second main line as well, which is the Cassiopeia Renekton Cho'Gath reroll line, and you Shurima Crest the Cho'Gath. I don't like this variation as much. It's just a lot less reliable, a lot harder to hit, and it's a lot harder to find all these units because, like we talked about before, one cost rerolls. Say it with me. Oh, no one's playing one cost rerolls. Oh yeah, shut up. I feel like a broken record, but like you get the idea. So I wouldn't recommend this line, but if you natural a lot of the units, feel free to go for it. And it's actually probably higher cap than this, but you probably do want to drop the Cho'Gath in the end game. Or maybe not, actually, probably not, I take that back, probably not. I don't know, I'm talking out of my ass, boy. But like, there is just that Shurima with Aatrox and Heimerdinger, they just utilize the stats so well, so like, yeah. You kind of want them on these instead, but I don't know what's a higher cap, like Aatrox 2, Heimer 2 with like Shurima Crest, or like Cho'Gath 3 that's been stacking the whole game with Shurima Crest. I don't know what's better. Evaluate your spot, think critically. But nonetheless, 6 Shurima, very easy to hit on level 6. Sorry. I mean, no, yeah, it is. Sorry, I was thinking like, is it actually? And then I saw that the Nasus and Azir, I'm like, oh, no, it's probably not. Oh, it is hard to hit. Oh, my bad. Maybe level 7. Level 7 will try to hit. Wow, this video is not very... No, Nefuri! Wow! I feel like that's not asking for too much. I mean, you're trying to hit a 4 cost on 6. I mean, that's asking for a lot. Okay, never mind. I take it back. It's level 7. This video is all over the place. But nonetheless, you just flex from this spot, really. You could go for bruiser. I don't really like that one as much, though. I think just trying to buff the Azir with strategist is probably your best option. Stuff like J4, stuff like Swain. You get the idea. Very easy to cap out here. You just Azir 2 is your secondary carry here with the Cassiopeia. Again, all the bow items, Nashor's, Shiv, GS. Good stuff. Again, very simple. And just the way to cap out here, again, Aatrox with the Shurima Crest, Cassante as well. You really want these two to be like your main hitters at the end of the game. But again, to get to this spot with Cassiopeia 3, Cho'Gath 3, you have to be high rolling out of your mind. So like, don't expect to go 9 Shurima or level 9. I think if you are guaranteed a Shurima Crest, just play vertically and you'll be fine. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it. 6 Shurima, very stable, especially with an Azir 2 and everything 2-star. Don't sleep on vertical 6 Shurima. Now, moving on, Noxus Crest. Now, I think a lot of people think Noxus Crest is like this S tier emblem as well. They think it's up there with like Bruiser and Shurima and demacia. I just don't think it is. I feel like, I don't know if it's just me, and maybe I just suck at playing Noxus, but whenever I play this Mordekaiser unit, I feel like this unit kind of just blows. Like, I play 7 Noxus, and it just doesn't feel very good. You always need Slayer when you're playing Mordekaiser. If you don't have Slayer with Mordekaiser, you're fucked. You're just fucked. And I think, obviously, like, 7 Noxus should be strong. I just... compared to the other forecasts and the other variations that are out there, Mordekaiser is like sort of your second best option all the time. It almost feels like it's just a Neela, very Neela-centric meta, where, sure, you could Noxus Crest your Azir instead and play around Azir. Totally understandable. But would I rather play an Azir 2 or a Neela 2? I'd rather just play Neela 2. And I feel like she can utilize the stats from Noxus really, really well, and I just don't see how this Neela unit is worse than Azir. Again, you can play Azir. Don't be like, I have to play Neela no matter what. But like, obviously, if you natural an Azir 2 and you find 0 Neelas, don't hard force the Neela. Play the Azir. You have other options available to you. And in fact, Noxus Emblem is so many stats, so you can put it on basically anybody and be fine. But again, in the current meta, out of all the forecasts, it's a very Neela meta. Super Neela meta. So I just don't think that this is as impactful as something like this. Sure, maybe play the Azir 2 for now if you find it, but just know your max cap, it's probably going to eventually be Neela, and then your giga cap is going to be Aatrox, obviously. This is the ultimate cap, the ultimate spot, right? But until then, it's probably Neela or Azir in this spot, in my opinion. So I feel like a broken rank. I feel like it's been the same thing multiple times, but you get the idea. I just don't think this Mordekaiser unit is as impactful as like Dila Azir. Okay, enough of that. Moving on. Second main line with this as well is again the one cost reroll variation where you play around Cassiopeia 3, Samira 3, Swain 3, and Neferi 3. You don't have to hit all these 3-stars. This is asking for a lot. Most of the times it's just these two are 3-starred and then these are both 2-starred. I will say this though, just play what you hit and then just tempo with it. If you find a lot of Samiras, not a lot of Cassiopeias, fine, tempo with it. A lot of Cassiopeias, not a lot of Samiras, fine, tempo with it, right? They both utilize blue buff very well. So if you have an open tier and you're playing around Noxus Emblem, I would consider this line. I would think it's really, really nice. Cassiopeia 3 is just not a 1 cost. This unit is just too good. So definitely playing around Cassiopeia 3, this is definitely going to be your max cap here, where you eventually try to also play into 9 Noxus in the end game, if you can find that second Noxus crest. Again, you might notice with Earth, a lot of the craftable emblems are super, super good. And in my opinion, you should actually lean the craftable emblems instead of the elusive ones. The reason being is that if you lean the craftable emblems, you always leave the option of potentially hitting that prismatic F4-2. For those of you who don't know, Earth's prismatic F4-2 gives you a spatula. Earth's grab bag gives you a spatula. You get 2 random components, champ, dupe, and a spat. So I think that if you can lean a craftable emblem at 2-1, you're setting yourself up for potential success in the end game for that potential spat, for that potential 9 chase trait. You always have that available to you. Definitely keep that in mind. So regardless, these are the main lines as well. And finally, we get to go over some of the not as relevant comps, but things that you should note in the current meta. The first one being the Sork emblem, this Taric 2 tech. For those of you who don't know, GM Blue released a Reddit guide a while back. A while back is in like, I think there was a car crash outside. Anyways, there are too many car crashes happening outside, by the way. I don't know what the deal is with that intersection, but it is not good. But anyways, Taric 2, Gargoyle, QSS. The idea is that Taric has a really difficult time casting if he gets CC'd. The QSS is really nice. He just gets infinite shielding. And people have sort of found that if you have Redemption in the backline and a Shen as well on your board, that he just gets to cast infinite. And he just doesn't die. So this board is actually kind of interesting, where you're sort of playing around this Vel'Koz, the Silco, and you're trying to tempo with Sorks, and eventually maybe you play 8 Sorks, maybe you play like 4 Bastion or whatever. You have a bunch of different outs and variations with this line. I will say this though, I don't think this line is very good for a couple of reasons. And why is that the case? The reason why I don't like this line very much is because I think their conditions to hit everything is a little too specific. You might have noticed that in the GM Blue guide, they were actually saying that you should play it with TF Legend. The idea being is that this line is sort of your out for if you end up playing stuff like multicaster, right? You're leading multicasters, but somebody else is hitting all the Gallios, then you just gargoyle the Taric instead, and you just play around 6 Sork vertically. I just don't think it's very good. And the reason why is because, like, if you're angling to play multicasters and you're playing a worse line because somebody else is hitting the units, well, if you're playing the TF Legend in the first place, why not just play Nila? Like, I feel like you have better outs in general, and also I feel like the cap for this board is very, very low. So it's very difficult to find like the Silco 2, the Vel'Koz 2, and still be like stable, and then just expect to be fine. I think this is a very 3-2 roll down board, try to hit everything, but you still want that Sork emblem to try to hit 6 Sork. It's weird. It's weird. I think it's, maybe I just don't have enough reps with this line, but if you're playing this line, I don't think you would play it with Earth. And then even if you're playing it with TF, you just have better options that are available to you. And if you're contested for a line, why are you playing the contested line in the first place? Plus, if you watch my last guide, you would know how to play around the multicaster line while you're contested anyways. So, I don't know. I just don't think this line is very good. I think there are better ways. I think if you're playing this line because you're angling multicasters, you just don't know how to play multicasters while contested. So, there you go. I wouldn't lean this line almost ever. It's very niche case scenarios. Maybe you're naturally a lot of Silcos and you just find very early Aries and you just natural the Sork emblem. But is this an Earth line? No. I would say this is a TF line, but I would say it's like a A- B tier TF line. Obviously, you hit everything, it's good. Don't get me wrong. You hit everything, it's good, and your line is good. But it's weird. I just don't see how you naturally get to this point unless you're sort of like forcing yourself to sort of shimmy your way into it. So anyways, I don't think it's the best, but it's definitely an option you have if you manage to find a natural line there. If you find yourself, by the way, playing that line, if you find yourself playing this line often, please tell me how you're getting there, because I don't see the line very well. The main reason is because I think force work is very weak, and I think if you're playing multicasters, you should be contesting the line anyways almost every single time. So yeah, let me know if you get there though. I would love to hear your opinion. Obviously GM Blue is higher ranked than I am, so maybe they're onto something I'm not. Regardless, it is what it is. Moving on. Again, I'm just giving my 2 cents. Ixtal Crest. Ixtal Crest, this line, oh my god. I saw this line. I thought it was Dish Soap stream, but I couldn't find the VOD. But in the regional in-houses, somebody had played this 4 Ixtal, 4 Rogue, 4 Slayer line. It was Quinn 3, Graves 3, Echo 3, and like a Fire Ixtal. This was the spiciest board I have seen in such a long time, and the board placed 3rd in the lobby. I thought that their board was, and actually funny enough, Dish Soap's board, if I remember correctly, I think he was playing a very, I think he was playing a board that felt like an auto win out. I don't remember if he was playing like a 9 vertical, but he was playing like an insanely capped out board, and this board almost beat it. So I would say don't sleep on 4 Ixtal. There are probably an insane amount of really interesting Ixtal lines. There's also the, I think the Fire Kale line as well. Which, you know what, while we're here, let's just talk about it real quick. But the Fire Ixtal Kale line is a really, really, really cool line. But basically the idea is that the connecting factor is Kiana here. You play 4 Ixtal somewhere with the Ixtal Heart. Obviously that's going to go on a unit that isn't an Ixtal unit, but obviously for the sake of brevity, we're just going to keep it like this. But maybe something like this, and you play 4 Bastion as well, something like this, something like this, something like this, right? Some variation of this line, and you just play like 4 Ixtal, and you just keep going vertically into either Bastions or Slayers, depending on your spot. But maybe you can cap out the board with something like this, right? This is asking for a lot, right? Obviously you want the demacia as well, so maybe it's like, I'm theory crafting at the moment, but you get the idea. Like, you actually have like a bunch of different ways to like cap out this board. It's probably not forced. It's probably not like, oh no, it probably is. You probably just cap out with something like this, right? It might not be 4 Bastion, but like nonetheless, you get the idea. You have a bunch of different ways to flex into this line, and this line actually probably has an incredible win rate, but it's one of those lines that you actually don't have a way to isolate within the data, because you aren't really able to filter just Ixtal, right? You're like, oh, this was a Fire Ixtal game, and then Ixtal Kale was played, and then you're able to like see like how well this does in the stats. I would say that this is actually one of the coolest boards of the set. It's just one of those boards you just can't find data on it, so you don't know actually how good it is. But if you can cook with this board, I would say go for it, because I think it's one of those boards you only get to play so few times, and if your spot is good for it, then to fucking send it, because it's cool. I think Ixtal has a lot of potential. It's just, it's very unexplored because we don't have a lot of data on it, and again, there's no way to filter it. But nonetheless, I think Fire Ixtal is super strong in the right scenarios, so definitely consider trying to play it. And things like the Quinn 3 on the Fire Ixtal Hex, or things like the, which way am I going? Kale reroll on the Fire Ixtal Hex. Really, really cool lines exist. Just, you have to experiment and be willing to innovate within those spots. Again, I know innovation is scary, but if you get to play the line, then do it. Fucking send it. Next one, 8 Challenger with the Challenger spat. Man, oh my, how far this comp has fallen. Like, this sounds good, and it should be good, but it's fucking trash. It's terrible. If you look at the stats of a Challenger, it has a sub 4 top 4 rate, or sub 50% top 4 rate, which is just so sad. Like, this is like a vertical that should be so strong, but it's actually like one of the worst comps in the game, performing so terribly. Challenger spat, I would say avoid it at all costs. A Challenger is just super fake news. Kaisa just doesn't do as good of a job cleaning up the boards as other 4-cost units, and she doesn't scale as well as other 4-costs. And Fiora is just, like we said before, a dead unit, so I would not recommend it. So again, don't play it. Finally, we've gone through all the comps. Let me just leave you with this. There is some interesting Tahm Kench tech going around the meta right now. I don't know what it is. I've seen people succeed with Tahm Kench though. I am terrified. But the River King might actually be real. So, take that as you will. Let me know if you know what the Tom Kench tech is. I would love to know what it is. But I hope this guide was helpful. I apologize if I rambled. I apologize if I went too in-depth or whatever, or went on tangents or whatever. Like, you know how it is. All right, there's a lot of things to cover. But anyways, I'll be streaming after this. Please feel free to come by and say hi. I would love to see you there. And I will see you guys all later. Until then, take care, guys, and happy climbing.